As usual, four couples from our company gathered for our monthly get-together. The day started out a little overcast, but that didn't stop us from hanging out until late in the evening. It was Pat who introduced me to Judy 4 years ago, and after a brief courtship, we became a couple and married 3 years later. I honestly believe that our marriage is strong and loving and that our feelings are genuine and mutual. When Jill decided not to continue her relationship with James, she met Wayne and their relationship eventually led to the end of their marriage. At this point, my wife, Judy, intervened in the conversation, expressing her surprise and sympathy for Jill's awkward situation. She exclaimed to Judy, "Judy, are you kidding me? 2 years ago, when Ree wasn't home, you were with Carl's kids and almost got caught, and you hid from him for a whole week." There was an eerie silence in the room as everyone pondered this surprising revelation. This physiological reaction usually occurs in cases of stress, sudden emotional arousal, or getting up too abruptly. In addition to the triggers mentioned above, another common factor that can lead to a vasovagal reaction is observing a medical procedure. In this case, even watching someone lose consciousness can cause a similar reaction. Going back to my own experience, I would say that a combination of stress and intense emotional experiences as well as a drastic change in posture contributed to the fact that I collapsed on the floor. I decided to remain calm and observe the situation calmly for a few more minutes. My sister Pat felt the need to address the problem. She said, "Now that the truth is out, let's assume it was just Gil's drunken ramblings." The others nodded their heads in agreement and added, "We don't even know if you remember what they said. Let's just calm down and see if we can get through this. If he remembers it, let's just say Gil was drunk and not thinking straight. Do you agree?" I decided to stay silent for a while, lost in my own thoughts, my mind racing, trying to piece together everything that's happened. After making sure I'm okay, I slowly stand up, correcting my posture, all eyes on me, full of curiosity and uncertainty. "Baby, are you okay?" I looked at her and then at everyone in the room. "No, Judy, I'm not okay. And to make matters worse, I now know that you're pregnant with this child and lied to me about having one, so no, I'm not okay." Despite the tears in Judy's eyes, there wasn't a single drop of sympathy in my heart. "I need to keep my distance from all of you. Don't try to follow me. Don't try to talk to me. Don't even call me. Each and every one of you should just stay the hell away from me." While I knew its striking appearance would expose me to their gaze sooner or later, I knew I couldn't expect it to be familiar with me for very long if I wanted to go unnoticed. My friend Jack lives on a large farm about 20 miles out of town, and luckily he has a spacious engine shed where I can safely store the car, and I know he'll have my back. I found shelter in a nice courtyard by Marriott on the outskirts of the city, which had a comfortable restaurant lobby, but I decided to give up on continuing to drink as I was already weak enough, and I sat there lost in my own thoughts, and gradually began to make sense of some of the details of the situation, and after much deliberation I began to piece together all that had happened, and it took some time, but eventually it all came together. I remembered how Tanya Jackson Carr's wife had asked me to marry her at Judy's Christmas party 2 years ago. She had come up to me and said, "Ray, you're a very attractive man, would you like to try a relationship between us?" I was flattered by Tanya's gaze, even though I felt a little embarrassed. Tanya had an irresistible attraction, luxurious blonde hair, a beautiful body that could arouse any man's desires. She obviously wouldn't have given me up if I had wanted to have a fling with her, but I think it's very likely that her advances were made under the influence of alcohol, so her intentions weren't entirely sincere. Despite the temptation, I remained firm. I frankly admitted to Tanya that she was incredibly beautiful and charming, but I couldn't accept her offer. I couldn't betray Judy. Just like that, Tanya answered my question with a smile and a comprehension of my answer, adding, "I've tried it, call me when you're ready." I must admit that her words impressed me, and that night I tried to be extra attentive to Judy to add a touch of excitement to our intimate moments. Adding a touch of excitement, but at the next New Year's Eve party this year, Tanya came to me again. "Are you free, Ray baby? I'd love to have some fun with you," she said, and for a moment my ego reveled in the attention, but I quickly reminded myself that the situation had begun to haunt me. "I'm really sorry about this because I really believed we could have spent some quality time together, but I understand everything and I won't bother you anymore, so call me when you're ready." After carefully considering my thoughts, I found Carl Jackson's phone number and dialed it, hoping to speak to Tanya. Luckily she answered the phone and not Carl. "Tanya, this is Ray Diebler. I'd like to talk to you if you have a chance. I'd like to meet in the living room of the Marriott. The whole room seemed to turn a sideways glance as she gracefully walked up to me. The whole room seemed to turn their eyes to me as she gracefully walked up to the bar where I was waiting for her, and I hugged her gently as we made our way to one of the booths at the back of the lobby so we could sit down and talk. I was waiting for you, Tanya. I called you here to talk to Frank. I'm sure you understand why. A mischievous smile spread across Tanya's face as she replied, Ray, of course I do. That's why I wanted to have some fun with you. I wanted to enjoy our vacation with you, and I wanted to enjoy our vacation with you. Tanya, I found out about the affair on my own today, and I'm not sure it makes sense to continue any kind of relationship right now, like you said, but nonetheless, I'd really like to know everything you know about the relationship because I've seen them acting intimately in the house with my own eyes. I can give you the names and phone numbers of the friends I spent the night with if you need proof, but when I got home the next day I asked Carl directly about his infidelity when I had no proof and Carl tried to lie to avoid it. But I stood my ground and convinced him that I had witnessed their behavior and that no amount of deception could excuse him. Tanya's response was unexpected, but sincere, and she confessed, I couldn't help myself, Ray, I loved him. We sat in the chair and I gave an ultimatum, making it clear that if Carl didn't come clean to me with all the details, I would get a divorce. Carl signed willingly. The agreement stated that if he broke his promise, then I would be entitled to everything in the event of a divorce. Carl loosened his hands and admitted to all his adventures, and he described all his affairs in detail, writing down names, exact times, places, and the frequency of these affairs. Tanya said. I smiled warmly at her and replied honestly, but Tanya, I'm not ready to be the instrument of your vengeance. Before we go any further, I need you to tell me all the excruciating details you know. I want to know everything, no matter how much it hurts me. Over the next 2 hours, Tanya gave me all the information she could about Judy's affair with Carl. She didn't spare a single detail, fulfilling my desire to understand all the nuances of their betrayal, that the affair between Judy and Carl had begun as a flirtation and an obsessive pursuit, that Carl had been attracted to another man's machinations, and that when I'd been away at an Air National Guard camp for a week, Judy had finally succumbed to his advances, and that Tanya had said that Judy had completely disregarded the fact that she and Carl had been caught off guard, and that when she'd finished her story, it seemed that I had no idea of the extent of Carl's cheating behavior was in the bag. After our conversation, I came to some conclusions about my future actions toward Tanya and my feelings toward Judy. I am not quite sure if he will agree to this, as from what I have heard so far it seems unlikely that he will refuse. Please send him this message and ask him to respond within a week or the nearest time, or I will expose him and make sure that he never does anything bad to you or any other unhappy wife again. We left the lounge together and took the elevator to the floor I was staying on, and after walking down the hallway we found ourselves in my room. Tanya said excitedly, Las Vegas. Are you taking me on a trip to Las Vegas? I don't care what Carl says. I'm going with you. I opened my cell phone and found several messages from Judy, which I immediately deleted without listening to them. One of them was from my sister, Pat, and I felt obligated to reply to this message, so I immediately dialed her number, and when Pat answered, I didn't give her a chance to speak, and went straight to the point, and I said sternly, Pat, I think I've explained everything, and I've told you that no one is allowed to contact me, not even my own sister. I asked directly that I not be called, and believe me when I say that this is the last time I will ever say that, and all of you should leave me alone, and without waiting for an answer, I ended the conversation. I'm sure our friendship will last a lifetime. After answering the phone, I didn't waste any time and got right down to business. Vinzo, if you say yes, I'll treat you like the best casino owner in all of Las Vegas. If you say no, I'll have to continue to treat you like the biggest clown in the land. Can you get me a room starting tomorrow night? Vince said he asked if I was going alone or with my lovely wife. I offered Vince a room with 2 beds, considering we were both married to people we cheated on each other with and the situation with the revenge program was still uncertain. Having 2 beds at the same time would give us a sense of comfort and flexibility. After sympathizing with Judy and my situation, Vince promised he would make all the necessary preparations and immediately sent me the booking information. I asked him if he needed any other help. Vince smiled brightly and said, You really know how to push the limits, Ree, but don't worry, I'll help you too. I'll write you the details and I'll see you tomorrow. I explained that Vince was an old friend of mine. He worked at the Bellagio Casino and I was the best man in his wedding to Felicia. We had known each other for years and every time I visited him, which was a couple times a year, Vince would get me a room. I said to Tanya, "Enjoy the trip, Tanya, because it's going to be fun and crazy, and we've spent 4 wonderful nights in Las Vegas, the games of chance we've played in the casinos together and alone, and the intimate times we've spent in the single bed in our bedroom." The passion between us was unusual and I really enjoyed lying in her arms. On the morning of the last day as we were packing up to go home, Tanya wanted to discuss something with me. "When you meet your wife and decide whether to stay with her or divorce her, I think it is important that you think about what you really want. Either way, I want to be with you again and I hope you feel the same way. When you make your decision, give me a call. It's up to you to make that choice. I may be able to offer you a chance. And of course, Tanya, I will definitely be in touch with you in a few days." And I have to say that I really enjoyed our time together, and I treasure our intimate moments very much. When I returned home, I contacted Judy and made it clear that I wanted to meet her at our home on the condition that our entire company would be there. I explained that I wanted to address all of them as a group. Judy hesitated and offered to talk to her individually. I firmly insisted that I wanted to address all of them at the same time and emphasized that otherwise I wouldn't be going home. Tanya and I took an Uber to her house. When we arrived at the door, I asked the driver to wait for me nearby while I accompanied Tanya to the threshold, where I embraced Tanya tightly and expressed my love with a long, passionate kiss. I couldn't be sure if Carl was there or if he witnessed our intimate moment, but I secretly hoped that he saw the genuine connection between Tanya and me. When everyone was gathered in the living room, I worked up the courage to tell Judy straight up about her cheating. It was with a heavy heart that I accused her of cheating on me for 2 whole years. My heart was torn out, and despite the circumstances, I still loved and supported her unconditionally. I treated Judy like royalty and tried to comfort her and convince her of my love for her in a difficult time, but I didn't realize she didn't deserve it. When I was confronted with the truth, my heart was squeezed as I realized that Judy was deceiving and manipulating me, and it was clear that all of our relationships since then have been based on lies and deceit. I forgive you for all of your deception over the past 2 years, and all along, everyone in the room remained silent, but when I mentioned forgiveness, a sigh of relief ensued, and a quiet conversation ensued, and I took a break to gather my thoughts, and I proceeded to tell her that over the past week, I had been with Tanya Jackson, and that Tanya had told me all of the details of your affair, and that Tanya had told me something very important, and that Cal can't have children, and that is that, my dear wife, if you weren't doing something similar with another man at the time, you weren't pregnant with Carl, and as Jill said, you were carrying my child. But I didn't sympathize with her, or with the other people in the room, whose expressions ranged from disbelief to shock. After listening to the entire conversation, I was ready to leave my room. A few days later, I decided to call Judy, and in a firm tone, I said, "I'm filing for divorce, and I'll get the necessary papers to you soon. I assure you that I will treat you fairly, even though your behavior toward me is not at all fair. Just sign the papers when they are served. The current lease on this house expires in 2 months, and I will pay the rent until then, but if you want to continue living here, you will have to sign a new lease in your name." 2 days after receiving the papers, Judy signed the divorce papers. Time went by and the divorce papers were finally issued. After I left, Judy spent the night in tears. Meanwhile, other couples in our firm were dealing with their issues and staying together. The first family meeting was filled with tension. Our parents were eager for us to reconcile, and Pat urged us to make amends, but I wasn't ready to bury the hatchet, and she didn't seem ready either. Her husband Bruce came up to me and apologized. He sincerely confessed, "I'm sorry, Ray. I see now that I should have told you about this," but Pat didn't want the truth to surface for obvious reasons. She knew that if we revealed her infidelity it would expose something else. "Nonetheless, I'm very sorry." I accepted Bruce's apology with a nod of my head. "Thank you, Bruce. I really wish you had told me about this sooner so I wouldn't have had to lose 2 years of my life." She replied, "I thought you would have called me sooner, but I'm glad you did. I know Carl was not happy about our week together in Vegas, but he also realized that he had no choice but to hold his tongue." We bonded in Vegas and I think we hit it off very well, and I will be coming to stay at your place for a few days during the furlough period, and hopefully our love will allow us to conceive a child. I think Carl deserves the week we have together, but I don't want to continue the relationship after that time. But if you decide to break up with Carl, I am willing to get to know each other better, and if we have a good and compatible relationship, we can consider getting married and having children, and that is the offer I am making to you, and no matter how it turns out, I honestly believe that we can remain friendly for the short time we are together. If you want to have lunch with me or spend some time together as friends, please don't hesitate to ask me, and I sincerely wish you all the best. Tanya and I are happily married and support each other in everything. Story 2. I am 37 years old and happily married to Judy, who is 32 years old. We have been married for 2 years and 2 years, and it is hard to say which moment determined our whole path in life, but it seems that everything got worse after an unfortunate phone call. While watching a soccer game, my concentration was disrupted by my wife's constantly ringing phone. I was annoyed that she kept interrupting me and commenting on the game, so I went to the kitchen and handed her the phone to answer. As I walked out of the kitchen, there was an expected patience in the air that I expected to explode at any moment, but to my surprise, silence rained down and her behavior changed markedly. Confused, I asked, "Why are you relocating?" "Move where?" As soon as the words left my mouth, I was tormented by the gravity of the situation. I'd already talked about the company's expansion plans, and she recalled that the board wanted to send employees to the new location to oversee the branch's growth. Curiosity led me to ask her if she had actually applied for the transfer, to which she replied that she had not, and on instinct I suggested that she should simply turn down the opportunity, but she said that the transfer was related to a long-awaited promotion, which she had been striving for throughout her career. Her single-mindedness even forced her to take on additional responsibilities and volunteer for various tasks. She put in countless extra hours and worked tirelessly to ensure that her 7-person team performed flawlessly. Her hard work should have borne fruit, although we didn't see it coming. I was faced with 2 different options. On the one hand, I could have advised her to turn down the transfer, sacrificing the promotion she had worked so hard for. On the other hand, I could have given her strong support, encouraging her to seize this opportunity she had been working so hard for. Despite my disappointment, I could not accept that I could not prevent her from realizing her dream. Gathering my courage, I looked her in the eye and said, "I am ready for whatever you decide." I assured her that I hoped my words would be rewarded with her reliable support. As her eyes filled with joy, a wave of relief flooded over me, assuring me that I had made the right choice. I took comfort from the stories of friends who traveled a lot and were separated from their families for months at a time, but still maintained their love and marriages. At the same time, I knew Judy's character, which enabled me to anticipate possible consequences. Obviously, we had to pay for the opportunity. However, if our marriage was on the rocks, then the lesser of 2 evils, letting her go was the only right decision. I couldn't shake the intense irritation I felt when I realized that my wife was purposely provoking me to make me feel even more uncomfortable, and that it was all in an effort to get me to make a decision in her favor. When all our preparations for the trip were complete, we began a long conversation about how our marriage should continue and should flourish naturally. Cheating never crossed my mind in front of Judy because I felt she was too focused on her goals to even think about it. We managed to get her company to agree to give her 5 days off a month, which gave me confidence. We called each other constantly, and she even bought herself a Bluetooth headset so we could talk while she was at work. Everything went well for the first 2 months. Our phone conversations became more frequent and I started to get a deeper insight into her life, even more so than when we lived together. It no longer seemed like a mistake to put her ambitions above my own needs, and we were in a positive space where it was the right thing to do, until one morning 2 months ago, Judy called me to tell me she had to cancel her trip to Michigan. I wasn't bothered by the fact that I was about to close a big deal, one that gave me a lot of freedom to work, with compensation estimated to be in the millions of dollars when the deal was done. I purposely kept it from her, saying I wanted to surprise her when the deal was officially finalized. To do this, I had to be hypervigilant, i.e. not be distracted by anything, so I didn't call and she didn't contact me. Personally, I don't consider myself a callous or manipulative person. If anything, I consider myself a victim, which is why I'm here to talk about how things played out between Judy and me. This deal could bring in millions of dollars and ultimately secure my family's financial future for many years to come. It meant a lot to me because it was the first client I had successfully completed. I knew that Judy's main dream was to go to Paris, so instead of calling her, I took it upon myself to meticulously plan all of the details of our vacation, from buying tickets and accommodations, to choosing delicious food, to must-see attractions. I left no detail untouched, bent on surprising her and telling her the news immediately, but inadvertently, I flipped through the videotape and saw her story. As his experience and knowledge was relevant to her work, a connection was made between them, and she captioned the photo "Dark Ages reveal angels." In retrospect, I should have felt something was wrong deep down inside. I decided to call my wife's company in Michigan to inquire about her whereabouts. Fortunately, the employee who answered the phone was a mutual acquaintance of ours, which made it easier for me to locate her. Throughout the flight, I kept visualizing scenarios in anticipation of how she would react when I broke the news of the deal to her. I called an Uber and it dropped me off at the specified address. During this time, I felt uncomfortable because the secretary was surprised to find out that Judy was married, but I knew that Judy liked to keep her private life a secret, so I decided not to pry into the details. After climbing 4 flights of stairs, I stood in front of her house with a bouquet of flowers hidden behind my back, and before I could knock on the door, I heard my wife moaning inside, saying things like "keep going on and on." I quickly left her apartment and went to work, and as a token of my appreciation, I gave her a $100 tip. Given the proximity of the yoga studio to her apartment, it was not difficult to observe her daily life. During this time, I tried to call or write to her, but she always cited her work and pleaded with me to give her a chance to end her professional life. I began to draft divorce papers and waited patiently for the day when she would come home with Henry. Unable to stand it any longer, I picked the lock on the door and crept towards her bedroom, cell phone in hand, recording every unpleasant detail of the sickening scene, but I managed to capture a full minute of them making out before I revealed my presence. I saw the pained look on her face when I told her that if she refused to sign the divorce papers, I would tell her coworkers and relatives about the video. But I can't help but feel disgusted with her, and every time I see her, images of Henry biting her come to my mind and make me sick to my stomach. She said she had quit her job, but that didn't stop me from sending the video of the evidence to her parents. I felt the need to show them the true colors of their child. She seems to be manipulating me into accepting the job offer so that I have no choice but to accept. The whole situation seemed like she was forcing me to agree without regard to my own wishes and feelings. Many of my friends were satisfied that I leaked the video of her cheating to her parents and forced her to lose her job without further action, and of course I had the satisfaction of watching her parents' relationship with her deteriorate after watching the video. I couldn't help but find it amusing that her eyes were bloodshot and very swollen, and she seemed to be crying whenever she had a spare moment. Whether it was caused by her tears or some other personal issue, it didn't matter to me. In fact, I realized that I could barely influence her because she was already in an emotionally unstable state, and I turned my attention to Henry, the man who had cheated on me with her. I ushered her in, which obviously made her understand that I was reconsidering the divorce. She wasted no time in beginning to explain her behavior, expressing doubt as to whether or not I would actually get a divorce. I turned to her, met her gaze, and asked the question that bothered me: how many times had this happened? I would have thought that after such an ordeal she would have learned from her mistakes and preserved her dignity by telling the truth. She said she didn't want me to fret over her problems because she had asked for too much in pursuit of her ambitions, but I didn't have the strength to pay any attention to her excuses. I was completely shocked that she could keep in touch with me so easily and not show even a hint of discomfort after lying. But the experience destroyed my thoughts. The truth is, I don't know how many times they've been together, and I probably never will, and while I can't say exactly how many times they've been together, I've managed to keep my composure, not revealing what I know to be true, and just guessing that he's Henry, and how can I be sure that he's not in Michigan with his own wife? I was horrified to find out that Henry was indeed married, and while that annoyed me, I managed to keep my mental equilibrium. She never found out my true intentions, and after dropping her off at the house, I asked for some time to think about our situation, but as soon as she was gone, I didn't hesitate to distribute the video to everyone who knew her, including her friends, her office secretary, and I didn't delay in booking a plane ticket to Michigan with the intention of ruining Henry's life. I rented a one-bedroom apartment not far from his house, and I carefully watched him from a distance, waiting for the right moment to retaliate. I watched his wife, who no doubt had flowing blonde hair, stunning gray-blue eyes and a smile that could charm anyone. At first, I was going to convince her to have an intimate relationship with me, just to get my kicks by showing her family her husband's impurity. But then I changed my mind, and I know what you may think. Except for the financial aspect, I consider myself a very attractive man, perhaps even worthy of the title of prom king, but nonetheless, something inside of me made me reconsider my intentions of revenge. Our first meeting on the side of the road soon turned into coffee together, which I had purposely arranged. I learned so much about her during these meetings that for a while I forgot the main reason I stayed in Michigan. After losing his job, Henry spent all his time looking for a new one, trying not to arouse Annie's suspicion. During one of our conversations, I learned an important piece of information. Henry had immigrated to the United States on a student visa. Unbeknownst to her, her revelation gave me the opportunity to revolutionize Henry's life. It was clear to me from Amy's story that she and Henry had been married for less than 3 years, which meant he was not yet a U.S. citizen, even though he had applied for a green card. I showed her the video and explained to her how it tormented me that the two of them continued to live miserable lives without facing the real consequences of their actions. Fortunately, it didn't take much to convince Amy of the gravity of the situation. Amy and I worked together on a plan to fight Henry. The first tried to let him know that I was involved in organizing everything that was happening to him, only to have the final news was that he was facing deportation and that he would be sent back to where he came from. I can only imagine the look on her face when she realized she was no longer the millionaire's wife. Story number 3. A lot happened in July 2020. June was a wonderful month and our family had a great vacation with our son and his father. However, as July approached, problems started to arise. We started arguing over small things and it became clear that she had no interest in physical intimacy, whereas I was really curious about her day and she was not responding to me. She gave me lingerie and said it was my birthday present, but when my birthday finally came around, all she gave me was a couple of records that meant nothing to me. After a long day at work, she said she was tired from the day as well, and we ended up just cooking and spending time together. After a series of violent arguments, my wife expressed a desire for some privacy. I was shocked by this request because I took it as evidence of the destruction of our marriage. 0 p.m. When I saw her, I couldn't help but express my joy at seeing her, but she simply mumbled in response, "This month has been terrible, this week has been terrible." Not only has she not been affectionate, but she has been rude and cynical and even downright abusive. I told him of my deep love for my wife, emphasizing that we had been together for 8.5 years and married for 1.5 years. At the time I was at a loss for words until someone suggested marriage counseling and shared his own experience. They recommended 2 books to me. One was The 5 Languages of Love and the other was The 5 Languages of Love, which I don't remember now. Meanwhile, I did not stop loving and being close to my spouse, both in conversation and in physical caresses, and even though she was getting further and further apart due to COVID, I met her needs on the day I came home when she was sick. Before I left, I shared with her all the valuable thoughts I had extracted from the book I had read the night before. I confessed my concern for her, expressed my love for her, and offered to attend a marriage counseling session to work out all the problems that had arisen, since our love for each other remained strong, in addition to emphasizing the importance of my son and of our lives. My words obviously touched her deeply as she burst into tears and repeatedly expressed her fear that I would despise her. I was shocked when she admitted to cheating on me last weekend, when according to her she was with a friend. I told her that I could forgive her but only if she told the whole truth, but she immediately fell silent and didn't give any names or details except to say that she had been having an affair since July and that it continued until that day in September. On Friday, I felt physically ill, unable to eat or sleep, gripped by anger and emptiness. On Saturday, my emotional state became very apparent to my brother, who suggested I stay home and calm down. He emphasized that his behavior was not a mistake, but a conscious choice. He suggested that if my spouse didn't talk to me, I would know everything I wanted to know. 30 minutes later, she finally showed up. I calmly explained to her that she had to make a decision, either our family and marriage or her love partner. Her response was just uncertain because she said she didn't know what to do. When she came back, I tracked her location through the app and she finally noticed that I had cleaned the apartment and started crying. I wanted to know what decision she had made and I asked her again what choice she had made, but all she could say was, "I don't know." I kissed my son on the forehead and said that I was going to stay at his uncle's house for a while and that he was passionate about his video games. He didn't seem surprised that I was leaving and promised to come back the next morning to pick up the rest of my stuff. 00 I drove up to the house with a big bag in my hand and I immediately went to the bedroom, bathroom and the dishes, and carefully put all my stuff there. Tears streaming down her face as she was in bed sat up straight and stared at me. She asked curiously what I was going to do next and I replied that she had made her choice. I pleaded with her, convincing her that there was another way out, but she had to admit the truth. The room fell silent, which made me furious and unable to contain the disappointment I felt inside. I vented my anger at her, shouting that all our efforts had been in vain. She said she didn't want to contact my family, but asked me not to blame her because she was ashamed. She took our son shopping and I sensed his confusion and disorientation. Before I left, she sent me a message asking me to stay and wait for her and her son. Despite my misgivings, I waited patiently, and when she walked into the room it was clear to me that our apartment had been destroyed. I decided to inform her parents of the situation because I knew they would be upset if they found out about it from her son. I drove him to school, made him breakfast, and sometimes drove him to meet his grandparents when I had to get up early for work, and when her parents asked about the situation, I told them all the details. She even asked me if we could make up, and I told her in no uncertain terms that if she really wanted me back, she would have to take certain actions. Last week, I picked my son up from practice and he wanted to show me something, which I happily agreed to because I love him so much. The temptation was strong, but I resisted and stood up. I made it clear that if she was still involved with this man in some way I wouldn't go any further. She said it was over and I sat back down and took her in my arms. We grew deeper and deeper, we even kissed a few times as I stroked her. I asked her to prove that she was really over the relationship and she started to cry and refused. I repeated again that if she really needed me then she knew what action she needed to take during the week. I had to reprimand her for neglecting her responsibility to care for her son. I agreed because I really wanted to be with him, but deep down I knew I wasn't ready for that kind of responsibility. However, when I went to pick him up at a friend's house after work, I saw the other boys couldn't wait to get into my car. I immediately called her, which she answered, and realized that if she didn't call back, I would leave. It took a good 3 hours before she finally called back. I objected that she really should feel remorseful given the difficult circumstances we were in. I pointed out that she had taken advantage of the situation and emphasized that such behavior would be unacceptable in the future. I declined the offer of sharing a bed and decided to leave. Obviously, my son was concerned about this, and despite being emotionally and financially exhausted, I drove back and forth often, as I lived 45 minutes away. October 25th happened to be my ex-wife's birthday, a strange week, and unfortunately, I found myself in a desperate attempt to desperately try to get her back. On Monday, I sent a video message to Cube, and she didn't seem to mind at all. As I prepared to leave, I was seized by an inexplicable curiosity and wondered what drove me to start investigating further. What shocked me even more was the fact that a letter addressed to my ex-boyfriend's lover was hidden in the shoebox. When I opened the letter, out of it fell a photograph of a family consisting of 2 little boys, a baby, a dog, a man and a woman. The accompanying message expressed deep disappointment and blamed my ex-husband for ruining her marriage. I quietly recorded the evidence and immediately went to her parents to find out the truth. Her father advised her to contact an attorney, gather all the necessary information, and file a motion with the court. During the soccer game, I noticed that she wasn't entirely confident, and curiosity drove me to start prying until she told me she was seeing someone else. I hadn't heard anything important from him in a long time, and it was unsettling, but I know how teenagers behave, and I understood that he was having a lot of issues right now. from his mom's hated boyfriend to transitioning from high school to high school, and to be honest, I was overwhelmed with excitement when he finally picked up the phone, and we had a great conversation. Our mutual love of video games made him open up. I found out that he was highly ranked in Rocket League and had been invited to participate in a pro tournament that would be aired on Twitch. For the first time in the hours following our conversation, I felt a stirring inside me that was not a feeling of joy, but a dull ache that penetrated right to the depths of my being, an ache that has been tormenting me to the point that I couldn't sleep last night. My father, observant as always, noticed the change in my behavior and asked me the reason for my concern. At first, it was difficult for me to express my feelings, but with his gentle insistence, I finally spoke up. Although I was overwhelmed with happiness that my son was still in my life and had the opportunity to participate in my life in whatever capacity he wished, the pain did not subside. But deep in my heart, I realized that the reasons don't matter and won't bring me comfort. Maybe it's time to consider letting go of everything. I haven't felt this happy in a long time, and my emotions are a mess as I'm torn between my love for my son and the pain of my ex-wife's betrayal. It is my sincerest hope that those who are experiencing pain will remain steadfast and remain positive towards those who are healing. Nonetheless, it is important to monitor her abilities as a parent. Obviously, it is likely that she will not be able to fulfill this responsibility. I would like to suggest that she schedule more time for me to spend with my son on a timetable rather than relying on last-minute requests such as "Can you take him to a playdate today?"